In this lesson, we're going to learn to validate the entry on the server side. So if you don't type anything and you click write, from the client perspective, we are going to get an error message. You need to type at least one character. Fine. Now, client-side validation is never tamper-proof. That means anybody on the client side can manage to bypass it. So we also need to have validation on the server side. We must have it also on the server side. Client-side validation is very weak. Anybody can bypass it. So let's go to the code for the server side. Let's assume the user sent the text of the entry with no characters, an empty string. So how can we validate that? Well, you go to the route that handles the creation of the entry. And that's here on server in server.js line 30. Here's the handler function, and we see it's creating the new entry and pushing to the array in memory that we have right now. Now we cannot push if new entry.text, in this case the rect.body.text, is empty. So we are going to send back an error to the user, and this operation will not be permitted. Okay. So let's break a line here, go to line 31. So we got that new entry. Well, let's see what I can do here. Body.text and so and so. So let's do the following. Well, I could do after the object here, or I could do before. The thing I'm thinking right now is because of this ID right now, we don't have a database. So usually we wouldn't set the ID here. We only have the ID after the database operation succeeded. So at this point, we would not have an ID. Let's do the following. Let's try afterward. Let's make believe the ID is not here. Okay, and I just messed up my window. Make believe the ID is not set yet, because ideally it wouldn't be set. It would be here, for example, new entry.id equals whatever, and this would actually be done by the database. Let's actually do that. I'm gonna do that here just to simulate what we would actually have later with the database. So you have the client side sending some body, and then we try first to get all the accepted properties, in this case text only, and there could be other ones. After that is when you can do the validation. So we got that new entry built. Of course, not saved yet. So let's do it. So we can check new entry.text. Well, what values could it be? Well, first, if the user doesn't give anything, it could be undefined. Or it could even be no if the user explicitly did that. Or it could be finally empty string. Right? All the invalid cases. Invalid cases. We got those three, right? Well, I can check if the new entry text is invalid. I can do something, right? Now I want to check what? First, how can I check if it's even defined? Well, this one will suffice as is, actually, because undefined is a falsy, what's called a falsy value. null is called a falsy value and empty string is a falsy value in JavaScript, okay? To illustrate that, I could go here to the browser, console tab in the dev tools, and I can say, for example, if undefined, then I'm gonna console log yes. This will not work. This return value is from the actual statement. It's nothing to do with. If nothing was executed, that means yes was not shown to the screen because this value, the condition was false. Undefined is false, so that becomes false. Same thing goes for null, right? It's also falsy value. And same thing goes for empty string. All right. And you can verify with weak comparison to double equals that this is false. Undefined is that's not what I meant. Anyway, let's go on. So this will suffice, but if you want to be explicit, you can also say, okay, if the entry text is undefined, or if the new entry text is equal to null, or new entry text equal to empty string. This is a very explicit way of doing it, okay? You can do this. So if the first you check, is it undefined? Right? Or if it's not undefined, okay, it is something else. Is it null? Or the double pipe means or, right? So it's if this or that or that. So it's going to check all these three conditions. The first condition that matches, that becomes true, it will automatically take that and execute everything inside. It will not care about everything afterwards. So if it was undefined, and this would be true, it would ignore every single entry after the or because it already knows it's undefined, it's invalid, already executes line 41 without even bothering to look at the remaining of the line. Okay, if you want to simplify, you could do like this. For example, you can do, oops, double equal null. If you do a double equal null, that means it's either null or undefined. So if it's null and undefined, invalid. And new entry.text, fine. We can also check the length, up to you. Or you can just leave and do like this. That's another way of doing it. Because if this value were undefined, it would take the inverse, right? The invert falsy value becomes true-d. So this is true and execute everything inside. Same goes for null and empty string. Anyway, one thing you gotta be careful about this one is if you actually intended the value to accept any of these three values. So you want to be careful about that. So perhaps I would go back to what I had before. Take care of actually handling these other values. Anyway, let's finally do this after that discussion. So if it's invalid, we don't want to add a new entry, right? We don't want to do any of this. So first we're going to send what's called an invalid response. Well, there are several HTTP statuses we could use, right? Usually when you get a successful, that's 200 OK. And you look at the network tab, you got a status here, tab 200 OK. This is not going to be 200 OK. Okay. So the user sent something that's okay, we got processed. I'm assuming it's a valid JSON and everything, but only that the actual field itself is required. So the user didn't really do anything wrong other than not typing what should have been typed. But besides, the formatting of the request and everything was fine. So we can use unprocessable entry. That's 422. Okay, so I'm gonna do res.status 422, and I'm gonna send some error message, for example. Maybe I could say message or whatever, error. Up to you to devise your own way of handling these things. I'm gonna say entry text is required. And you have to be very careful here. You have to return, because if you don't return after this line, it's gonna keep executing the code even though you set a response to be sent. So don't forget to return so the code does not execute everything afterward. Be careful. So you need that. Some people like to put it here before the res. I'm not in that league. I like to do it afterwards. So it's up to you. Let's save this and go back. Let's now we have to test this. Now the front end, it already has the validation. How can we bypass it? Well, I could look at the source and do some stuff and try to bypass the code here and everything. Another way is using some sort of client program that can make HTTP requests easily. It's a program that's convenient for us developers to make those requests and to debug and test APIs. One of those programs called Postman, and it's the one I'm going to use here. Mind you, there are many kinds of these programs. You can even do this from the command line using the command curl, for example. It's up to you. Choose whatever you want. I'm going to demonstrate this debugging with Postman. So I have already downloaded it, and I'm going to click here, skip signing in, and it's going to take me to this. I'm going to do some stuff here. So I don't care about this right now. So I want to click to get a new tab. You can see we can make the request. First is the verb. You can choose get or post. That's the one we're focusing right now. So if we want to create a new entry, that's post. And you give the URL. In this case, it's going to be http://localhost. I think it was 3000, right? 3000 and /entries endpoint. Now to give the body to this request, right? You have to go to the body tab here. Choose, since we're dealing with JSON, let's do raw. And instead of text, do JSON. And then here in the text box, you type the JSON. Open braces. Now the first key is going to be text under double quotes. Make sure there's under double quotes. The text, okay, let's first try without anything at all, actually. Let's try something that works. This works. And then we're going to do the invalid cases. Okay, this is a new entry that we want to add. Mind you, our API doesn't have any kind of authorization. So anybody can just do whatever, right? So that's why this client can just go there and do whatever. If you had some sort of authorization, you would go under authorization perhaps and do something, or even change the header and add an authorization header here. But we're dealing with very simple stuff starting from scratch, so that's not in the scope right now. So let's focus on the request body here. So we got that. Now I'm going to send. Let me watch first the terminal here. Click send. And I had an error. What happened here? I forgot the 0. Local was 3000, not 300. Okay. Since we don't have any logging in the server, I didn't see anything, but Actually, I got some 200 OK. And ID is 4. This works. Let's check the client through the browser. Let's go to the browser. And I'm going to refresh. This works is here now. That worked, right? Now let's try. First, let's try the case where the user does not send any text key at all, just an empty body. Let's try. Click send. Now you see the status now is 422 unprocessable entity. And we got that response we created. Error entry text is required. So that worked. Let's try the case where we actually pass no as a text value. This also was validated. 422 unprocessable entity. Now let's try the empty text. Once again, validated. Add one letter at least. It works. So we'll go here to the client and it's there, A. So going back to the code, let's look at what we did. So we added validation to check if the text has at least one character, right? Effectively, that's what this does. The way we did that was right after we parse the body, right? That is, we just build a new entry that's not yet saved. We check, is the text no? First, is it undefined? Is it null or is it empty string? If any of those cases match, we do a res dot status 422. This will set the status code, and you send dot send to send an actual JSON object with the key error and the message here that the client can use to show this actual error in the client side, the web page. And don't forget to add return here, otherwise the other parts of the code will execute. That's not what you want. All right, so for this lesson, that's it, and I hope to see you next time.